Two sisters, one shocking plan to make him jealous. But when it all backfires, their lives spiral out of control. The truth will leave you stunned. They say opposites attract, and I guess there's some truth to that. Olivia and I are most definitely polar opposites in nearly every way. But I really thought we were on the same page regarding anything that was truly important. That's probably where I went wrong. I thought that as I sat in my in-laws' living room, staring silently at the four of them. My mother and father-in-law, Linda and George Parker, were watching me intently. My wife's older sister, Rachel, sat glaring at me with her arms crossed, while Olivia, my wife of 3 years, sat silently, her deep blue eyes pleading with me. Even with tears filling them, her eyes still sparkled, like she had some untold secret. It wasn't difficult to figure out why we were all here. I'd had divorce papers served to my wife 2 days ago. That tends to get people's attention. Why was Rachel here? Because she was one of the main players in the downfall of our marriage. I had hoped we could lay all our cards on the table, avoiding the endless he said, she said drama that most divorces go through. That was my intent, but I knew the 4 other people sitting across from me had their own agendas. "Thanks for coming to see me," I began. "This is quite a surprise for all of us," George said. "Olivia has told us what happened, and I can tell you we're both very disappointed in both of our daughters. What they did was childish and irresponsible, but divorcing her because of it seems extreme." "I understand how you feel that way," I responded, "and that's why I'm here tonight. I wanted everything to be out in the open so there would be no misunderstandings. Olivia and I had been married for just a few years, and we rented an apartment in Austin, so there wasn't much to divide other than our savings. A simple, even split should take care of it all." George was calm, but I could sense his discomfort. "Don't you think you're rushing things a bit? What they did was bad. But divorce?" "Yes, it was bad," I sighed. "But I doubt they told you everything. I'm sure Olivia isn't seeing everything that happened either." "What were you told about that night?" I asked. "Well," George said, taking a breath, "we've all known that you and Olivia have been fighting for the past several months about her relationship with Rachel. Olivia told us that you felt she was spending too much time with Rachel and needed to cut back. We all noticed, just like you, how Rachel has been angry since her divorce. You said it was influencing Olivia, and that's why you've been upset. We've talked about it with you a few times." He paused, and Linda, who had been silent, nodded in agreement. "However, a month ago, you told Olivia she needed to completely cut ties with Rachel. You demanded she stop all communication with her sister. Olivia refused, and that upset both of them. But she kept calling and going out with Rachel, and you kept getting angrier." I nodded, listening to his version. This was mostly the truth. More than a month ago, I had hired someone to follow Olivia and Rachel for one night. The report wasn't as bad as I feared, but it wasn't good either. It became clear that things needed to change before they went too far. "Then, last Saturday night," George continued, "you and Olivia had an argument while she was out with Rachel. Some hurtful things were said in the heat of the moment. My daughters acted like children and tried to prove their point. Olivia said they'd had a few drinks, and it was all a silly idea to make you jealous, to show that she was still attractive to other men. Afterward, she planned to tell you that, even though other men found her desirable, she still chose you. Yes, it was juvenile," he added. "But divorce?" "I'm not going to disagree with you on that," I said. "But you still don't have the full picture. May I?" Both George and Linda nodded. "First, I hope you know how much I love Olivia." Olivia nodded along with her parents. Rachel, meanwhile, rolled her eyes and let out a loud sigh. It wasn't a surprise. The last 2 years had been rough for my sister-in-law. Her husband of 4 years, Daniel, had left her and their 2-year-old daughter for a younger woman at his office. Olivia and I had only been married for a year when that happened. Rachel took it hard, and she developed a toxic opinion of men, seeing them all as heartless. I didn't blame her entirely for that feeling. There are plenty of guys who fit that description. But her bitterness had started to seep into my own marriage. Rachel and Olivia weren't just sisters, they were best friends. I was a couple of years older than Olivia. She had always idolized me in the early years, but over the last year and a half, since Rachel's divorce, Olivia had spent more and more time comforting her sister. At first, it wasn't a problem. But several months ago, they started going out every weekend for girls' night. At first, it was fine, but shortly after, it became strained between Olivia and me. This last month had been hell. We'd been arguing non-stop until things finally blew up last Saturday night. That led to me filing for divorce on Monday and having her served on Thursday, which led us to this meeting. They were all right, as far as in-laws go, but like most families, they had their own dysfunctions. George was the head of the household, but he had a soft spot for his girls. Linda was quiet, but she was the disciplinarian in the family. Fortunately, or unfortunately, they tended to stay out of their daughter's marital problems. Of course, that could be a good thing most of the time, but it hadn't helped Rachel's marriage, nor ours. Whether you believe me or not, I really do love Olivia. The moment I met her, it was like my whole world changed. I turned and stared at my wife. I wasn't exaggerating when I said Olivia rocked my world. She was stunning. A beautiful brunette, petite, with a heart-shaped face and bright blue eyes. She wasn't the most beautiful woman in the room, but she had this magnetic energy. You couldn't help but be drawn to her. Olivia smiled weakly, still pleading with me through her teary eyes. She was that fun, popular girl everyone knew in high school and college. She wasn't the prom queen, but she was always on the top 10. She was the life of every party, the friend everyone could count on to make things more exciting. I'm more the quiet, pragmatic type. I guess you could say I brought stability to her life, and she brought color to mine. I met Olivia when she was in her final year of college. I had just graduated and started working in my field. We waited until she graduated, and then we got married. I said she brought color into my life, and I meant it. She was my world. Mark, don't say it like that, Olivia pleaded. We've had problems, but we can work through this. I'm so sorry I hurt you. We can get through this. I still love you. Honestly, Olivia, I don't know. For a marriage to work, both sides need to want to stay in it. And I'm not sure that's true anymore. It is, she insisted. I promise it is. Oh, please, Rachel groaned. Why don't you drag this out even more? Rachel, please, Linda exclaimed, shooting her a stern look. Come on, Mom, Rachel snorted. We all know he's always been controlling her. God, she's more of a servant than a wife. Is that how you feel, Olivia? I asked quietly. Olivia froze, like a deer caught in headlights. This had been one of our biggest concerns when we first got married. We had talked about it back then and had revisited the topic many times since. I thought we had worked through it. I believed we complemented each other well. Her strengths balanced out my weaknesses, and vice versa. She had said she felt the same way. But now, it seemed something had changed. Sometimes, my wife answered vaguely, brushing away a tear. I know we've talked about this before. Many times, I said quietly. At least back when we were still talking, not yelling at each other. Well, it seems you didn't listen, Rachel replied sarcastically. Rachel, I know people have given you your space, waiting for you to heal from your own divorce, I said, my voice hardening. But shut the hell up. Rachel recoiled as if she'd been slapped. She was about to fire back when George intervened. Rachel, please, he said calmly. Let's not let this turn into a shouting match. No one wins that way. Dad, I'm not going to let this jerk tell me. Rachel, shut up. Linda's voice cut through the room like a knife. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. Rachel sat back, looking stunned. I could only imagine how long it had been since her parents had spoken to her like that. It seemed overdue. Rachel, I said, cutting through the tension. I'm sorry you married a piece of garbage. What Daniel did was wrong. Absolutely unforgivable. But not all men are like that. I know you think I'm controlling. But if I were as manipulative as you say, why would I have encouraged Olivia to spend so much time with you at the beginning? Why would I have stayed silently in the background, knowing you were justifiably struggling to be around men? I turned to Olivia. You can ask your sister whether you believe me or not. I care about you, Rachel, not just because you're my sister-in-law, but because I hate seeing anyone taken advantage of like you were. But after a while things needed to change because your hurt and anger started to affect my marriage. I looked back at George. Bobby, I wonder if you know what was really going on that night. So that everyone can understand what we're actually dealing with, I think we need to talk about it." I turned back to Olivia. "Or maybe you'd like to tell them what really happened." Olivia sighed and looked down at the floor. "Okay, Mark," she said softly. "I'll tell them. I'll be honest and leave nothing out." She looked up at her parents, then to Rachel, before beginning. "First of all, Dad's right. We were mad at Mark for trying to push me away from Rachel. I mean, sometimes Mark can be so damn controlling. The girls' nights out started because I wanted to help Rachel get out more. But after a while, I realized I needed those nights too. I needed time to laugh and cut loose with other women, and Rachel is my best friend. When Mark insisted I cut all communication with her, it made me angry. I felt like he was treating me like a child. I told him I needed to be with my sister, and what did he do? He demanded that I stop seeing her altogether. "Hannah," I said calmly, "when I tried to tell you that your relationship with Rachel was hurting our marriage, what did you say?" "I told you she was family, and I couldn't just abandon her," Olivia replied, exasperated. "And I told you," I said, my voice now icy, "that I was your husband. Damn it, Olivia. It was that uncompromising attitude that drove me to my breaking point." "I know," Olivia whispered. "What we did that night wasn't right. It was mean, and I'm so sorry I went through with it." "And what exactly did you do?" I asked, my voice hardening. Olivia glanced nervously at her parents and Rachel. It was clear she didn't want to go into further detail. She added quietly, "I don't think we need to go into the specifics." "Well, I think we do," I replied coldly. "Great, Mark," Rachel jumped in, coming to her sister's defense. "Keep manipulating her like you always do. Maybe you can make her dance like a puppet for you when you're done." "Well, Rachel," I said sarcastically, "I wouldn't talk about manipulating if I were you. I thought you loved your sister." "I do," she shot back. "Well, whose brilliant idea was it to try and destroy her marriage?" I asked, looking her square in the eyes. Rachel turned away, clearly uncomfortable. Olivia remained quiet, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Go on, Olivia," I urged. "Tell them how you planned to make me think you'd been with another man." Olivia's voice shook as she continued. "We stayed out at the club, the Velvet Room, longer than usual that night. We weren't drunk, but we'd had enough drinks to know we shouldn't drive. It was later than usual, and Mark kept calling to check up on me. I knew he didn't want me going out with Rachel, so I felt like he was harassing me. I told him he wasn't my parent, and then I hung up on him. When he called back, I blew up. I told him he didn't know me, and that if he kept calling, I'd show him exactly how independent I was. Then I hung up on him again. An hour later, he called again, and I turned off my phone. "I'm ashamed to admit it," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper. "That's when we came up with the plan to make him think I'd been with another man." "So how did you do it?" I asked icily. Olivia looked down at her hands. "We went into the bathroom and got ready to make it look like something had happened. Rachel pinched me a few times to leave what looked like bite marks." Linda gasped in shock. "Oh my God, Rachel, I can't believe you'd suggest that to your sister." Rachel just sat there, looking down, while tears welled up in her eyes. Olivia pressed on. "When I got home, I wasn't sure about it anymore. I felt terrible, but I couldn't bring myself to tell Mark the truth right away. When I walked in, the first thing Mark asked me was where I'd been and with whom. I was so mad at him. I said it was none of his damn business, but if he wanted to know what had happened, he should follow me upstairs. I went into the bathroom and started the shower. When I stripped, I could tell he saw the bruises on my body. He also noticed I wasn't wearing any underwear." "And what did you say to me when I asked where your underwear was?" I interrupted coldly. I said Ted had them," Olivia stammered. "Actually, you said Fred, but close enough," I said, still trying to keep my anger under control. "When I looked into your eyes, I saw just how far you'd gone, and it broke me. I couldn't believe the woman I loved would do something like that to hurt me. Olivia's tears were falling freely now. I didn't realize how much I hurt you, Mark. I saw the pain in your eyes and it scared me. But instead of backing down, I doubled down. I got into the shower to clear my head, but when I came out, you were gone. I found your wedding ring on the kitchen table and you were gone, she said, her voice trembling. I tried calling you so many times, but you wouldn't answer. I even went to your office to find you, but they said you had taken leave for a family emergency. I knew then that I had pushed you too far. Her tears were uncontrollable now, but she continued. 2 days later, I was served with divorce papers. Now, I'm here, begging you to forgive me and give us another chance. I know I screwed up, but I didn't cheat on you. Please believe me. If you say so, I grumbled. I didn't, Olivia whispered through her tears. Maybe, I said coldly, maybe not. But you wanted me to think you did, and congratulations, you succeeded. Now I'll never be sure. For all I know, that could be your excuse any time you actually did cheat. You could just tell me it was all an act. Olivia stared at me in horror. But Mark, I'd never… George? Linda? I interrupted, turning to face them. Aren't you the ones who love to tell stories about all the pranks Rachel and Olivia used to pull when they were kids? Mark, those were when they were little, George replied, his voice laced with discomfort. Really? I said. You're telling me they didn't pull things like that in high school and college? George remained silent, but Linda spoke up, her voice breaking. We all know they pulled stunts like that in high school and college, Mark. But that doesn't mean she cheated on you. She swears she didn't. She hadn't cheated on me that night, I replied, shaking my head. At least not that night. I know because I had her followed. I had been suspicious for a while, so I hired someone to watch her when she went out with Rachel. Linda gasped in shock. You had her followed? Yes, I said, locking eyes with Olivia. The private investigator reported that Olivia didn't sleep with anyone that night, but it was clear to me that she intended for me to believe she did, and that's enough. I didn't, Mark, Olivia cried, her voice filled with pain. I swear I didn't cheat on you. It was just a cruel trick to make you jealous. I stood up, shaking my head. Whether or not you actually cheated on me, Olivia, you've destroyed my trust. How could I ever go through life wondering if you might do this again? Even if you didn't cheat, you wanted me to think you did. And that's something I can never forget. Mark, Olivia pleaded, standing up as well. I know what I did was wrong. It was cruel and immature, but I swear I'll never do anything like that again. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to earn back your trust. Please don't give up on us. I turned to George and Linda, who sat in stunned silence, processing everything they had heard. You've both always told me about how close your daughters are, and that's fine. I get it. Family is important. But in a marriage, your spouse is supposed to come first. I asked Olivia to cut back on the time she spent with Rachel, and I was reasonable about it at first. But things escalated, and I told her that Rachel was a bad influence. I even came to you, asking you to intervene, but you didn't. I was willing to do anything to save our marriage, and Olivia wasn't. Son, we didn't know things had gotten this bad, George said, his voice soft and filled with regret. I came to you both because I knew your daughters respected you, I said, my frustration growing. I asked you to help me, but nothing changed. You sat back and let them push me to the breaking point. Linda looked up at me, her eyes brimming with tears. Mark, we're sorry. We didn't realize the extent of the problem. We should have stepped in earlier. Maybe, I said, but now it's too late. I turned back to Olivia, who stood there, her face pale and tear-streaked. You wanted to prove you were independent, that I didn't control you. Well, congratulations, you've made your point. But in doing so, you've also destroyed my faith in our marriage. I'm not asking you to choose me over your family, Olivia, I said softly. But I need a wife who will stand by me, who will fight for our relationship. And I'm not sure you're willing to do that. Mark, I am, Olivia cried. I swear I am. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll break all contact with Rachel if that's what you need. I shook my head. No, Olivia. I'll never ask you to choose between me and your family again. I tried that before, and look where it got us. I've learned my lesson. I deserve a wife who understands that marriage means standing by each other through everything, and I'm not sure you do." "I do, Mark, I swear I do," Olivia insisted. "Please, give me one more chance." I turned to leave, but Olivia grabbed my arm. "Please," she begged, her voice breaking. "Don't walk away. I know I've messed up, but I love you, and I'll prove it to you every day if you give me the chance." I looked at her, my heart heavy with the weight of everything we had been through. "Olivia, I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of being the only one who wants this marriage to work. I need a partner who's willing to fight with me, not against me. And right now, I don't think you can be that person." Olivia collapsed into a chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Rachel stood up, glaring at me with fury in her eyes. "You're just going to walk away? After everything you two have been through?" "Rachel," I said, my voice calm, "I'm not the one who destroyed this marriage. You helped Olivia come up with a plan to hurt me, and she went along with it. You've been poisoning her mind against me for months, and now we're here." "You're the problem," Rachel spat. "You've always been controlling, trying to make her into something she's not. You didn't love her for who she is." "That's not true," I said, my voice hardening. "I loved Olivia more than anything, but I also respected myself enough to know when I was being disrespected." I looked at Olivia one last time. "I'm sorry," I said softly, "but I can't do this anymore." I turned and walked out of the house, leaving behind the family I thought I had once been a part of. The pain in my chest was overwhelming, but I knew that leaving was the right thing to do. 3 weeks later, I was on the West Coast, my new life in Seattle underway. My transfer came through faster than I had expected, and I had scrambled to get everything in order. I was staying with a college buddy, Kyle, who lived in Queen Anne, a nice part of town near my new job. I'd planned to live with him for a month while I figured things out and found a place of my own. Seattle was a fresh start. It wasn't as glamorous as LA, but the change of scenery, the misty mornings, and the sense of beginning anew were exactly what I needed. I had spoken to Olivia a couple of times over the phone before I left, just to tie up loose ends. I told her I knew she hadn't slept with anyone that night. My PI had confirmed it the following day. But it didn't change anything. The damage had already been done. I still couldn't trust her. And honestly, I was done. The months of arguing, the constant tension, the emotional exhaustion, it had all worn me down to the point where I didn't have anything left to give. I told Olivia I was moving to Seattle, and she had broken down in tears on the phone, asking why I was leaving, as if everything hadn't been made perfectly clear during our last meeting at her parents' house. It seemed like she still believed we could work things out. She even asked me to hold off on replacing her until we met in person one last time. I had agreed, but the very idea of finding someone new made me feel nauseous. Besides, there wasn't anything left to say. I didn't see much point in meeting again. What could we possibly talk about? She was sorry. I knew that. I was sorry too. She told me it would never happen again, but I didn't believe her. That was that. Now, as I climbed the steps to Kyle's apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. I was starting over, and the city of Seattle, with its cool, damp air and gray skies, felt like a place where I could finally breathe again. On the other hand, there was a gnawing ache deep in my chest, a sense of loss that I couldn't quite shake, no matter how hard I tried. When I reached the second-floor landing, I stopped in my tracks. I heard something. At first I thought it was the wind or the sound of traffic below, but no. It was unmistakably the sound of crying. And immediately, I knew. "Olivia?" I said, rushing up the last few steps. There she was, leaning against the concrete wall outside the apartment, her face buried in her hands as she sobbed uncontrollably. "Hannah," I said softly. She looked up, her tear-streaked face filled with pain and confusion. "You promised," she whispered. "You promised you would wait." I blinked, confused. "What?" She pointed toward the apartment door, which was partially open. Standing just inside was a tall, beautiful blonde woman wearing one of Kyle's oversized t-shirts, her long, messy hair falling around her shoulders. I wasn't sure why she had even bothered putting on the shirt. It wasn't covering much. Her big blue eyes looked at me with surprise. "Vanessa," I sighed, frustrated. "We've talked about this. Please, stop answering the door like that. One of these days you're going to give someone a heart attack." Vanessa smiled sheepishly. "Oops, sorry," she said, pulling the shirt down a bit more. "It's just Kyle and me hanging out. I didn't think you'd be back so soon." "Yeah, well, next time, maybe tie the shirt or wear something a little more appropriate," I said, trying to keep the mood light while Olivia's pain-filled gaze burned into my back. I turned back to Olivia. "This isn't what it looks like. Vanessa is Kyle's girlfriend. We're just roommates." But Olivia wasn't listening. "I thought we were going to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought we could work this out." I sighed. "Olivia, I told you I needed space. You knew I was moving here to start fresh. I'm not with anyone. You need to calm down." Her eyes, wild with emotion, darted between me and Vanessa. "You're lying. I can't believe you'd replace me so fast." "I didn't replace you," I said, my frustration rising. "Vanessa is Kyle's girlfriend. She's been staying here while they figure out some things." Olivia continued to cry, her whole body shaking. I reached out, but she recoiled from my touch. "Olivia," I said softly, "let's go inside and talk. Just you and me." She hesitated for a moment, then finally nodded. I led her inside, away from Vanessa, and sat her down on the couch. Kyle had left for work hours ago, so the apartment was quiet. Vanessa waved awkwardly and disappeared into Kyle's room, closing the door behind her. I sat across from Olivia, trying to gather my thoughts. "You're early," I said quietly. "I wasn't expecting you until later this evening." "I had this whole plan," she said, her voice still shaky. "I was going to surprise you, show you how much I've changed. But it all blew up in my face. It seems like every plan I make does that lately." She wiped her tears away and looked at me with such sorrow in her eyes, it broke my heart all over again. "I came here to apologize again," she said softly. "Not just for what I did, but for everything. I've been a terrible wife, and I've hurt you more than I can ever take back. I know I don't deserve another chance, but I want to fight for us, Mark. I love you, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes." "Olivia, we've been through all this before," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've apologized, and I appreciate that. But it doesn't change what happened. I don't know if we can ever go back to how things were." Olivia shook her head, her voice breaking. "I don't want things to go back to how they were, Mark. I want them to be better. I've had a lot of time to think about everything, and I realize now that I took you for granted. I thought I could push you, and you'd always be there, no matter what. But I was wrong." She looked down at her hands, fidgeting nervously. "After you left, things fell apart. Rachel and I had a huge fight. She apologized for pushing me into that stupid plan, but I told her it was just as much my fault. I chose to go along with it." Olivia paused, her voice trembling as she continued. "Mom and Dad talked to Rachel too. They told her they wouldn't be watching her daughter anymore so she could go out and act like she didn't have responsibilities. Dad was in tears when he told her how ashamed he was of her. She's been seeing a therapist for the past few weeks, trying to work through her issues." "I'm glad she's getting help," I said softly, but my heart still felt heavy. "Things with my parents have been strained since you left," Olivia admitted. "They had their own issues to work through, and I think me and Rachel's problems only made things worse. Mom slapped me the night you told me you were moving to Seattle. She told me to stop acting like a spoiled little girl and to fix my marriage if I cared about it." I raised an eyebrow. "Linda slapped you?" "Yeah," Olivia laughed bitterly. "It's only the second time in my life she's done that. The first was when I was in high school and called her a name I shouldn't have." She wiped her eyes again, trying to keep her composure. "Mom told me I was old enough to get married, so I was old enough to act like an adult. She said if I really wanted to make things right, I had to grow up and stop blaming everyone else." I nodded, feeling a slight pang of sympathy for her. "Your mom's a wise woman. I know, Olivia sighed. I've been thinking about everything she said, and she's right. I've been acting selfish and immature, and I don't blame you for leaving. But I'm here now, and I want to fight for us. Her words hung in the air, and I wasn't sure how to respond. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hope that things could somehow be different. But another part of me was still hurt, still guarded. Olivia, I came to Seattle to start over, I said slowly. I needed to get away from all the pain, from everything that happened. I know, she whispered. But you also came here because you didn't want to close the door on us completely. You wouldn't have agreed to meet with me if you had. I didn't respond, unsure of what to say. She was right, in a way. If I had truly wanted to sever ties completely, I wouldn't have met with her. But that didn't mean I was ready to jump back into our marriage. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away, Olivia said, her voice barely above a whisper. I know I've broken your trust, and I have to earn it back. I'm just asking for a chance. I looked at her, seeing the raw vulnerability in her eyes. This wasn't the defiant, stubborn woman who had stood before me months ago. She was broken, just like I was. Olivia, it's not just about forgiveness, I said gently. It's about whether we can rebuild something that's been shattered. Trust isn't something you can just glue back together. I know, she said, her voice trembling. But I believe we can. I know we can. She leaned forward, her eyes pleading. Please, Mark, I'm not giving up on us. I'll move here. I'll get a job. I'll do whatever it takes to prove to you that I've changed. Just give me one more chance. I sat back, running a hand through my hair. My mind was racing, trying to process everything she was saying. Could I give her that chance? Could I really open myself up to her again, knowing what had happened? The silence between us stretched on, the weight of our shared history hanging over both of us. Finally, I spoke. All right, I said quietly. We can try, but we have to take it slow. This isn't going to be easy, Olivia. If we're going to rebuild anything, it's going to take time. A lot of time. Olivia's face lit up with hope. I know. I'm willing to take it as slow as you need. I just want to be with you. But, I added firmly, if we're going to try, there are going to be boundaries. No more games, no more manipulation. If we're going to make this work, it has to be real. I promise, she said, her voice filled with sincerity. I'm done with all of that. I just want to make things right. I nodded, though my heart still felt heavy. We'll take it one day at a time. Olivia smiled through her tears, the relief evident on her face. Thank you, Mark. You don't know how much this means to me. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the rainy Seattle skyline. I wasn't sure what the future held for us, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like there might be a glimmer of hope. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of raindrops pattering against the window. Seattle was living up to its reputation, and for once, I found the constant gray skies soothing, rather than depressing. I glanced at the clock, 8:30 a.m. I had agreed to meet Olivia at 9, so I had just enough time to grab a quick shower and get ready. As I stood under the hot water, I let my thoughts drift. Yesterday's conversation had been emotionally exhausting, and while I had agreed to give Olivia another chance, I still wasn't sure if I'd made the right decision. I wanted to believe that things could be different, but deep down, I was scared that we'd just end up back in the same place. Hurt, angry, and broken. After getting dressed, I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The air was crisp, and the light drizzle had turned into a steady rain. I made my way to the cafe down the street where Olivia and I had agreed to meet. It wasn't far, just a couple of blocks away from Kyle's apartment. As I walked, I couldn't help but wonder what today's conversation would bring. When I arrived, Olivia was already there, sitting at a small table by the window. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting with the coffee cup in front of her. She had always been a bundle of energy, and even now, in this more subdued version of herself, I could see the remnants of that same restlessness. "Hey," I said as I slid into the seat across from her. She looked up, offering me a tentative smile. Hi. We sat in silence for a moment, the awkwardness between us palpable. Finally, Olivia spoke. I know yesterday was a lot, she began, her voice soft. And I just want to thank you again for agreeing to meet with me. I nodded, still not entirely sure what to say. I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about, she continued, her fingers still nervously tapping the edge of her coffee cup. And I just want you to know that I'm serious, Mark. I meant what I said. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to fix this. I know you are, Olivia, I said, my voice measured. But like I told you yesterday, this isn't going to be easy. We can't just pretend like everything's okay. I'm not pretending, she said quickly. I know it's not okay. I know it's going to take time. I miss you. I miss us. I looked out the window, watching the rain drizzle down the glass. I miss us too, I admitted. But the US I miss isn't the US we've become. She nodded slowly, her eyes downcast. I get that. I do. And I know I've changed. I know I let Rachel get into my head, and I let my own insecurities ruin what we had. But I'm not that person anymore, Mark. I've been working on myself. I've been seeing a therapist too. I raised an eyebrow, surprised. You have? Yeah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. After you left, I realized I couldn't keep living like that. I needed to figure out why I acted the way I did, why I pushed you away when all I ever wanted was to be close to you. I was quiet for a moment, processing what she had just told me. I hadn't expected her to take that step, and a small part of me was impressed. But I was also wary. Promises and apologies were one thing. Actions were another. I'm glad you're getting help, I said finally. That's a big step. But it's going to take more than just therapy for us to get through this. I know, she said earnestly. That's why I'm here. I want us to work on this together. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Olivia, I need to be honest with you. I'm not sure if we can get back what we had. I don't know if I can ever trust you the way I did before. Her eyes welled up with tears, but she didn't look away. I understand that. I don't expect you to trust me right away. I just want the chance to earn it back. I looked down at my hands, feeling the weight of her words. Could I really open myself up to her again? Could I let go of the hurt and the anger long enough to give her the chance she was asking for? I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted. But I'm willing to try. Slowly. We take things one step at a time, and if at any point it feels like it's not working, we'll stop. Olivia nodded, relief flooding her features. That's all I'm asking for. Just a chance. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of the woman I had fallen in love with. The spark that had been missing was still there, buried beneath the pain and the mistakes. Maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward. Okay, I said quietly. We'll try. She smiled, wiping away the tears that had started to fall. Thank you, Mark. I promise, I won't let you down. I didn't say anything in response. Instead, I looked out the window again, watching as the rain continued to fall, a steady rhythm against the glass. Later that day, after our conversation at the cafe, I walked back to Kyle's apartment with a strange sense of hope. Things weren't fixed, far from it, but for the first time in months, I felt like maybe there was a path forward. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was a start. Kyle and Vanessa were lounging on the couch when I got back, watching some mindless reality show on TV. Vanessa smiled at me, her carefree attitude a stark contrast to the emotional weight I'd been carrying around. Hey, she said, flipping her hair over her shoulder. How'd it go? It went okay, I replied, sitting down in the armchair next to the couch. Kyle turned his attention away from the TV and gave me a look. Just okay? I shrugged, We talked. We're going to try and work things out, but it's going to be slow. Slow is good, Kyle said, nodding. Take your time. You don't have to rush into anything. I know, I said. I'm just not sure where this is going to lead. Vanessa leaned forward, her expression uncharacteristically serious. Do you still love her? I hesitated, thinking about the question. Yeah, I said finally. I think I do, but I'm not sure if that's enough. Kyle sighed, leaning back against the couch. Love's tricky like that. Sometimes it's all you need, and sometimes it's not enough, but it's a good place to start. I nodded, not entirely convinced but willing to give it a shot. For now, that was all I could do. The following weeks passed by in a blur. Olivia and I kept things slow, just like we agreed. She was in the process of moving to Seattle, and in the meantime, we met a couple of times a week just to talk. We didn't push things. No big declarations of love. No rushed attempts to fix everything at once. Instead, we focused on rebuilding our friendship, one conversation at a time. It was awkward at first. There were still moments where the old pain crept back in, moments where I'd look at her and remember how she had hurt me. But for the most part, I tried to let go of the anger. I couldn't move forward if I kept holding on to it. Olivia, for her part, seemed genuinely committed to changing. She was seeing her therapist regularly, and every time we talked, she seemed more centered, more self-aware. The toxic energy that used to hang over her had started to lift. I could see glimpses of the woman I had fallen in love with, and it gave me hope that maybe, just maybe, we could make this work. One rainy evening, we decided to take a walk through Discovery Park, one of my favorite spots in the city. The park was vast, with trails that wound through thick woods and along the cliffs overlooking the Puget Sound. It was peaceful, exactly the kind of place I needed to clear my head. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound being the soft crunch of gravel under our feet and the distant hum of the city. Olivia was the first to break the silence. Do you think we'll ever get back to how we were? She asked, her voice soft and tentative. I thought about her question for a moment before answering. No, I said honestly. I don't think we'll ever be the same as we were. Too much has happened. We've both changed. She nodded, her expression thoughtful. That's probably a good thing though, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to go back to who I was. Me either, I admitted. I think we need to focus on building something new, something better. She looked over at me, her blue eyes searching mine. Do you think we can? I smiled slightly, a rare moment of optimism slipping through. I think we can try. She returned my smile, and for the first time in a long time, I saw a glimmer of hope in her eyes. As we continued walking, Olivia hesitated before speaking again. I haven't told Rachel about us. I glanced at her, surprised. You haven't? She shook her head. I wanted to, but I don't think she'd understand. She's still working through a lot of her issues, and I don't want to drag her into this before we're ready. I know that sounds selfish, but it's not selfish, I interrupted. I think it's smart. We're still figuring this out ourselves. We don't need any outside pressure right now. Olivia sighed in relief. I'm glad you feel that way. I've been worried about what she'll say when she finds out. I mean, I know she played a part in what happened, but she's still my sister. I get that, I said, nodding. But this is about us, not her. We need to focus on what's best for our relationship, not what other people think. She smiled gratefully. Thanks, Mark. I'm really trying to prioritize us this time. I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. I can see that. And I appreciate it. For the first time in months, I felt like we were on the same page. There were still challenges ahead. But in that moment, I felt a sense of peace. Maybe we weren't completely broken. Maybe there was still something worth saving. A few days later, Olivia officially moved into her new apartment. She had found a small place in Capitol Hill, a lively neighborhood just a few miles from my place. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was perfect for her. A fresh start in a new city. I helped her move in, and by the end of the day, we were both exhausted. We sat on the floor of her new living room, surrounded by boxes, eating takeout from a local Thai restaurant. "You know," she said between bites of her pad Thai, "I never thought I'd move to Seattle." "I never thought I'd be here either," I replied with a small chuckle. "It's funny how life works out, isn't it?" she mused, twirling noodles around her fork. "I mean, if you had told me a year ago that I'd be living here trying to fix my marriage, I wouldn't have believed you." "Same here," I agreed. "But here we are." She looked at me, her expression softening. "I'm glad we're here." I smiled, feeling the same. Me too. After dinner, we spent some time unpacking, getting her place set up. It felt natural, easy, like the tension that had once defined our relationship was starting to fade. We weren't back to where we used to be, far from it, but we were building something new, something better. As I was about to leave for the night, Olivia stopped me at the door. "Mark," she said softly, her hand resting on my arm. "Thank you. For everything." I turned to look at her, my heart feeling lighter than it had in a long time. "You don't have to thank me. We're in this together." She nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I know. But I still wanted to say it." I leaned down and kissed her on the forehead, a simple gesture that felt like a small step toward healing. "Good night, Olivia," I whispered. "Good night, Mark," she replied, her voice filled with hope. As I walked out into the cool Seattle night, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt like we were heading in the right direction. Over the next few weeks, Olivia and I continued rebuilding what we had, one step at a time. We didn't rush into anything, and we kept our focus on communication. Slowly, the cracks in our relationship started to fill, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were moving forward. But just as things seemed to be smoothing out, there was a lingering tension that neither of us could avoid. Rachel. Olivia still hadn't told her sister about us, and I could tell it was weighing heavily on her. While we were doing our best to rebuild our relationship, Rachel was a constant presence in Olivia's life, and it was only a matter of time before she found out the truth. One evening, while we were having dinner at Olivia's apartment, she brought it up. "I've been thinking," Olivia said, her fork idly pushing around her salad. "I need to tell Rachel about us. I can't keep avoiding it." I nodded, understanding the difficulty of the situation. "Do you want me to be there when you talk to her?" "No," she replied quickly. "I need to do this on my own. I'm worried about how she's going to react. She's still so angry at the world, and I know she's going to blame me for what happened." "She might," I said carefully. "But you can't avoid this conversation forever. If we're going to move forward, you need to be honest with her." Olivia sighed, her fingers drumming nervously on the table. "I know. I'm just scared." I reached across the table and took her hand. "You're strong, Olivia. You can do this." She smiled weakly, squeezing my hand. "Thank you. I just hope this doesn't make things worse." A few days later, Olivia finally met with Rachel to have the long-overdue conversation. I waited anxiously at home, knowing this was a huge moment for Olivia. Whatever happened between her and Rachel would have a ripple effect on our progress, and I couldn't help but feel nervous. A few hours passed before Olivia called me. "Hey," she said, her voice sounding drained. "I just left Rachel's." "How did it go?" I asked cautiously. She was silent for a moment before speaking. "It was bad, Mark. Really bad." I could hear the tears in her voice. "She freaked out when I told her about us. She said I was a traitor, that I was betraying her after everything she'd been through. She doesn't understand why I would want to be with you after what happened." My heart sank, though I had expected this kind of reaction. "What did you say?" "I told her the truth," Olivia said, her voice shaky. "I told her that I love you, and I'm willing to fight for our marriage. But she doesn't see it that way. She thinks I'm abandoning her." I sighed, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on us. "I'm sorry, Olivia." "I am too," she whispered. But I couldn't keep lying to her. I had to be honest. You did the right thing, I assured her. Rachel will come around eventually. She just needs time. I hope so, Olivia said softly. I hate that it had to come to this. I feel like I'm being torn between you and her. I don't want you to feel that way, I said gently. I'm not asking you to choose between us. But Rachel needs to understand that your marriage comes first. I know, she replied, her voice breaking. It's just hard. She's my sister, and I love her, but I can't keep letting her control my life. You've taken a big step, I said, trying to comfort her. It's going to be tough, but you're doing what's best for you and us. That's what matters. I know, she repeated, though her voice was filled with uncertainty. I just wish it didn't have to be this way. The fallout from Olivia's conversation with Rachel cast a shadow over the next few weeks. Rachel was furious, and she refused to speak to Olivia. She had always been the dominant one in their relationship, and now that Olivia was standing up for herself, Rachel didn't know how to handle it. It was painful to watch Olivia go through this, but I knew she was stronger than she realized. Meanwhile, our relationship continued to slowly improve. We still had our moments of doubt, but the more time we spent together, the more I started to believe that we could make it work. Olivia was proving day by day that she was committed to changing, and that gave me hope. One weekend, we decided to get out of the city for a while and take a trip to Whidbey Island, a peaceful retreat just north of Seattle. We rented a small cabin by the water, hoping to spend some time away from the stress and distractions of the city. The ferry ride over was quiet, the cold wind whipping across the deck as we watched the city fade into the distance. When we arrived on the island, it felt like we had stepped into another world. The air was fresh, the trees were lush, and the water lapped gently against the shore. This is exactly what I needed, Olivia said as we walked along the beach, her hand in mine. Me too, I agreed, taking in the peaceful surroundings. We spent the next few days relaxing, hiking through the island's trails, and talking about everything we had been through. It was a chance for us to reconnect, away from the noise and chaos of our everyday lives. One night, as we sat by the fire in our cabin, Olivia turned to me, her expression serious. Mark, she began hesitantly. I know we've been taking things slow, and I'm really glad we are. But I need to ask you something. I looked at her, my heart racing slightly. What is it? Do you think you'll ever be able to fully trust me again? She asked, her voice filled with vulnerability. The question hung in the air between us, and I knew this was a pivotal moment. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you the way I did before, I admitted. What happened hurt me in a way that's hard to describe, but what I do know is that I'm willing to try. I'm willing to work toward rebuilding that trust, little by little. It's not going to be easy, and it's going to take time, but I'm open to it. Olivia nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. That's all I need to hear. I'm not asking for everything to go back to the way it was. I just want the chance to earn back your trust. I reached out and took her hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. You've already started, and I'm grateful for that. She smiled through her tears, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. We weren't fixed, and we weren't perfect, but we were trying. And for now, that was enough. After our weekend on Whidbey Island, something between Olivia and me shifted. The quiet moments we shared, the deep conversations, and the understanding that we both were committed to rebuilding what had been broken. It all felt like a turning point. It wasn't that everything was magically fixed, but for the first time in months, I started to believe in the possibility of a future together. We continued to take things slow. I wasn't ready to move back in with her, and she didn't ask me to. We saw each other a few times a week, still focusing on communication and being open with one another. But the more time I spent with Olivia, the more I realized how much she had grown. She wasn't the same woman I had fought with for months on end. She was more self-aware, more willing to take responsibility for her actions, and less defensive. It was a huge change, and I couldn't deny that it was making me reconsider a lot of things. I had always been practical, sometimes to a fault, but when it came to love, practicality didn't always apply. And maybe that was okay. Maybe love was messy and imperfect, but that didn't mean it wasn't worth fighting for. Olivia's relationship with Rachel, however, remained strained. Rachel was still refusing to talk to her, and it was taking a toll on Olivia. Despite everything, she loved her sister deeply, and the rift between them was a constant source of pain. One evening, after a particularly hard day, Olivia showed up at my apartment, her face drawn with exhaustion. "Hey," I said as I opened the door, letting her in. "You okay?" She shook her head, tears already welling up in her eyes. I tried calling Rachel again. She won't even answer. She's cut me off completely. I pulled her into a hug, holding her as she cried into my shoulder. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I know this is hard." "I just don't understand how she can hate me so much," Olivia sobbed. "We've always been so close, and now she's acting like I'm the enemy. I'm trying to do the right thing, Mark. I'm trying to be better, but it's like I'm losing everyone I care about." "You're not losing everyone," I said softly, brushing a strand of hair away from her face. "You're not losing me." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with sadness. "But what if I do? What if I screw this up too?" I sighed, pulling her to sit down on the couch. "You won't, Olivia. You've already shown me how committed you are to making this work. But Rachel, she's got her own issues to work through. You can't carry the weight of her anger and hurt. You can't control how she feels. All you can do is focus on you. On us." She nodded, though her expression was still filled with doubt. "I just hate that it has to be like this." "I know," I said gently. "But you've come a long way. You've done the hard work, and that's what matters. Rachel will come around when she's ready, but don't let her anger take away from the progress you've made." Olivia wiped her tears, trying to smile through the pain. "Thank you for always being here, even when I don't deserve it." "You deserve it," I replied, squeezing her hand. "We both do." As the weeks passed, Olivia and I fell into a new routine, one that felt healthy, even comfortable. We continued to work on our relationship, focusing on trust and communication, and little by little, I could feel the walls between us coming down. But I was also cautious. It wasn't lost on me that just because things were going well now didn't mean we wouldn't face more challenges down the road. I had learned from the mistakes of the past, and I wasn't about to let myself get blindsided again. One afternoon, while we were having lunch at a small cafe in Capitol Hill, Olivia surprised me with an unexpected question. "Mark, what do you think about us going to couples therapy?" I raised an eyebrow, caught off guard. "Couples therapy?" "Yeah," she said, fiddling with her napkin nervously. "I've been talking to my therapist about us, and she suggested that we might benefit from it. I mean, we've been doing well on our own, but I think it might help us work through some of the deeper stuff, like the trust issues and everything." I thought about it for a moment, weighing the pros and cons. On the one hand, things had been going well between us, and I wasn't sure if we needed a therapist to guide us. But on the other hand, trust was still a fragile thing between us, and maybe having a professional help us navigate the deeper wounds would be beneficial. "I'm open to it," I said finally. "If you think it could help, I'm willing to give it a try." Olivia smiled, looking relieved. "I think it could be good for us. It's not about fixing everything right away. It's about giving us the tools to keep moving forward." I nodded, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. "Okay, let's do it." We started seeing a therapist once a week, and to my surprise, it helped more than I expected. The sessions weren't easy. There were still difficult conversations, moments of frustration, and times where I wanted to walk out and never come back. But the therapist, Dr. Miller, was skilled at helping us navigate the hard stuff without letting it destroy us. We talked about everything: the hurt, the betrayal, the anger, and the hope. We explored the deep-seated issues that had driven us apart and the love that had brought us back together. Slowly but surely, we started to understand each other in ways we hadn't before. One session in particular stood out to me. It was about trust, the one thing that had been the most difficult to rebuild. "I feel like I'll never fully be able to trust again," I admitted, my voice tight with emotion. "Every time things start to go well, I have this nagging fear that it's all going to fall apart again." Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully. "That's a very common reaction when trust has been broken. But trust isn't something that can be repaired overnight. It's built through consistent actions over time. Olivia can't erase what happened, but she can show you, through her behavior, that she's committed to earning your trust back. And you, Mark, have to be willing to take small risks, to allow that trust to rebuild, even if it feels scary." Olivia reached for my hand, her eyes filled with sincerity. "I know I hurt you, and I know it's going to take time. But I'm not going anywhere, Mark. I'm here, and I'll keep proving that to you every day." I looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. This wasn't easy for either of us, but we were both in this together. "I know," I said quietly, "and I'm trying." As the weeks turned into months, therapy continued to help us heal, and I found myself slowly starting to trust Olivia again. It wasn't perfect, and there were still moments of doubt, but the progress was undeniable. We were stronger than we had been before, and I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make it. Rachel, however, remained distant. Olivia still reached out to her every now and then, but her sister wasn't ready to forgive. It hurt Olivia deeply, but she had learned to accept that Rachel had her own journey to go through. It wasn't easy, but Olivia was learning to let go of things she couldn't control. As for us, we continued to take it one day at a time. We weren't rushing back into the life we had before, and that was okay. We were building something new, something better. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. By the time 6 months had passed, things between Olivia and me had settled into a rhythm. Our weekly therapy sessions had become a safe space for both of us to voice our fears, hopes, and concerns, and slowly but surely, the wounds of the past were healing. I had started to let my guard down, allowing myself to believe that we could actually make it through this. Olivia, for her part, had been consistent in her actions. She showed up for us, every single day, and that was something I no longer took for granted. But while things were improving between us, there was still one unresolved issue that lingered like a shadow over our relationship: Rachel. As the months passed, Rachel continued to refuse any contact with Olivia. She hadn't forgiven her for choosing me over their bond, and she made it clear that she wasn't ready to reconcile. This created a painful divide in Olivia's life. But to her credit, she was handling it with more maturity than I had ever seen before. One evening, as we were having dinner at a new restaurant in Pioneer Square, Olivia brought up the subject again. "I've been thinking about Rachel a lot lately," she said, setting down her fork. "It's been months since we've spoken, and I don't know if she'll ever forgive me." I took a deep breath, knowing how much this weighed on her. "It's not your fault, Olivia. You've done everything you can. The rest is up to her." "I know," she replied softly, her eyes downcast. "But it still hurts. I've lost my sister, Mark. And I don't know if I'll ever get her back." I reached across the table, taking her hand. "You haven't lost her. She's just not ready. Give her time." Olivia sighed, squeezing my hand. "I hope you're right. I don't want to give up on her. But I also can't keep putting my life on hold, waiting for her to come around." "You shouldn't," I said gently. "Your life is moving forward, and that's what matters. If Rachel is ever ready, she'll reach out. But you can't let her hold you back from living your life." She nodded, though I could still see the sadness in her eyes. "You're right. I just miss her. That's all." "I know," I said, feeling for her. "But you're doing the right thing. You've made your peace with it, and that's all you can do." She smiled weakly, though the pain was still there. "Thank you for always being so patient with me. I know I haven't been easy to deal with." "You've been worth it," I said with a smile. "We've both grown a lot through this. I'm proud of us." Olivia's smile widened, and for the first time that evening, I saw a flicker of hope return to her eyes. As the months passed, life began to feel more normal again. Olivia and I had settled into a new rhythm, one that felt healthier and more stable than before. We still had our ups and downs, but the difference now was that we knew how to communicate through the tough times. We had learned to listen, to be patient, and to give each other space when needed. The trust that had once been shattered was slowly being rebuilt, piece by piece. By the time we reached the 1-year mark since we first began working on our relationship, things had changed dramatically. We weren't the same couple we had been when we started, but that was a good thing. We were stronger now, more honest, more aware of our flaws and how to work through them. On the anniversary of the day I had moved to Seattle, Olivia surprised me by planning a weekend trip to San Juan Island, a place we had always talked about visiting, but never had the chance to. The island was beautiful, with rolling hills, scenic cliffs, and breathtaking views of the water. It was the perfect getaway. As we stood on the edge of a cliff watching the sunset over the water, Olivia turned to me, her eyes full of emotion. "Mark," she began softly, "I want to thank you for everything." I looked at her, slightly confused. "For what?" "For giving me another chance," she said, her voice trembling. "For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. I know I hurt you, and I know I'm not perfect, but I've spent the last year trying to be better, for both of us." I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through my chest. "You don't have to thank me, Olivia. We both worked hard to get here." "I know," she said, her eyes welling up with tears, "but I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. You didn't have to give me another chance. But you did, and I'll never take that for granted." I reached out and pulled her into my arms, holding her tightly as the cool ocean breeze swept over us. "I love you, Olivia. I always have. And I'm glad we're here together." She looked up at me, her eyes shining with tears. "I love you too, Mark. More than you'll ever know." As we stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized that this was what we had fought for. This moment, this peace, this sense of being exactly where we were meant to be. We had been through hell and back, but we had made it. We had rebuilt our love from the ashes, stronger and more resilient than before. And now, standing on the edge of that cliff, I knew that we were finally ready to move forward. Together. When we returned from San Juan Island, life resumed its normal pace. Olivia and I had fallen into a comfortable routine, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't holding my breath, waiting for something to go wrong. I trusted her again, and that trust had been earned through months of hard work and commitment. Then, one afternoon, as I was heading back to my apartment after work, I received a phone call from Olivia. "Mark," she said, her voice excited and breathless, "you're not going to believe this." "What?" I asked, curious. "I just got off the phone with Rachel," she said, her voice filled with disbelief. "She called me." I stopped in my tracks, stunned. "She called you?" "Yes," Olivia said, her voice shaky with emotion. "She said she's ready to talk. She wants to meet for coffee tomorrow." "That's incredible, Olivia," I said, feeling a surge of happiness for her. "How do you feel about it?" "I don't know," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared, but also relieved. I've been waiting for this for so long, and now that it's finally happening, I don't know what to expect." "Take it one step at a time," I advised. "You don't have to fix everything in one conversation. Just focus on reconnecting." "You're right," she said, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Mark. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll be fine," I assured her. "You've come so far, Olivia. Just be honest with her, and everything will fall into place." "I will," she said softly. "I'll let you know how it goes tomorrow." The next day, Olivia met Rachel for coffee. I waited anxiously for her to call me afterward, hoping that the meeting went well. When my phone finally rang, I answered immediately. "How did it go?" I asked, my heart racing. It was intense, Olivia said, her voice still shaky from the conversation. But it was good. We talked about everything. About what happened between us, about the divorce, about you. She was still hurt, but she said she understood why I made the choices I did. That's huge, I said, feeling a sense of relief. I know, Olivia agreed. It's going to take time for us to fully repair our relationship, but this was a good first step. She even said she wants to meet again next week. That's amazing, Olivia. I'm so proud of you. Thank you, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. I couldn't have done this without you, Mark. As Olivia and I continued to move forward, I realized that life would never be perfect. There would always be challenges, moments of doubt, and difficult conversations. But that was okay. We had learned how to face those challenges together, and that was what mattered. We weren't the same people we had been when we started this journey, but we were stronger now. And as we looked toward the future, I knew one thing for sure. We had made it through the storm, and we were ready for whatever came next, together.